Hello, everyone, and welcome to Traffic Corner Tuesday. My name is Nancy Crow, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing for SPAC Consulting and your host for today's session. I want to thank everybody for joining us this late summer for our meeting, and also to let people know that during our session today, we would invite you to be participatory in the conversation, but to please mute your mic when you are not communicating with us so that we have clear audio for all of the attendees at today's session. Also, I wanted to let everyone know that today's session is brought to you by the SPAC Enterprise family of businesses. SPAC Consulting is part of SPAC Enterprise, and SPAC Enterprise includes many of the brands that you are familiar with, including Mike on Traffic, our blog, Counting Cars, our online store that sells traffic data collection products, SPAC Consulting, of course, which is bringing you the Traffic Corner Tuesday sessions. SPAC Academy is our online store for digital tools for transportation professionals. Traffic Data Inc., which is a data collection firm here in the Midwest, and tripgeneration.org, which is a free online source of trip generation data. Just a reminder to everyone that our sessions have been updated for the fall. Our next session is in September. It is on autonomous vehicles. If you were participating in our conversation in July, this is a repeat of that session. It was so popular that we had many requests to do a repeat. So once again, we will be having that session on September 26th with Mike Spack and Bryant Fiesick. And then join us again in October for a new session on convenience stores and selecting an ideal location. Now joining us today are our two presenters. Many of you are familiar with Mike Spack. He is the president of SPAC Consulting and is the recognized industry leader of traffic studies. Mike is a graduate of the University of Minnesota, the past president of the North Central section of the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and he is a fellow of the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Since 1996, Mike has led over 1,000 traffic engineering projects, and during the past 2 decades, Mike has founded 4 companies, including SPAC Consulting, and he is the creative force and principal writer of the industry-leading blog, Mike on Traffic. Please join Mike for today's session. Also presenting today is Max Moreland. He is a regular presenter on Mike on Traffic, as well as on Traffic Corner Tuesday. Max Moreland is a longtime traffic engineer with SPAC Consulting. He is also a graduate of the University of Minnesota and specializes in traffic impact studies. Max also heads our operations for our traffic data collection company called Traffic Data Inc. He is actively involved in managing our trip generation data on tripgeneration.org, and he is the co-author of the Traffic Counting Manual. Please join me in welcoming both Mike and Max.
Thanks, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. So Mike and Max here. And as many of you know, here late August, getting into September, you're going to start hearing from a lot of the schools. Probably is already happening if you're a city traffic engineer or city engineer, requesting school speed zones, what can be done to improve safety. I was just out at a Catholic grade school yesterday. We're working on kind of a new plan for their campus to reroute the buses and pick up drop-offs to tighten that up. So definitely the time of year with school just around the corner in a few weeks. So today, Max is joining me. We've been doing quite a few school speed zone studies, a lot for the city of St. Louis Park, and Max is going to be running through the process we've been going through, kind of talk about the process, but then also kind of what we look for and some of the other options besides just lowering the speed limit.
So, thanks, Mike. Kind of the reference guide we're using to do our school speed zone studies is MnDOT's, Minnesota Department of Transportation's Guide to Establishing Speed Limits in School Zones. The link at the bottom of the slide here will take you there. It's a great resource if you're looking, if you're considering school zone speed limits. Kind of goes through the whys and the hows of how to do that. In the state of Minnesota, each road authority, city, county, state, has the authority to establish speed zones, but they do have to follow this guidance from MnDOT. So it's a well-known resource in the state of Minnesota. All right, so first off, why have them? Well, the main reason for a lower speed is safety near schools. There's high concentrations of children, and I think we can all safely agree that the safety of our children is super important. So when we know there are going to be a lot of kids around, doing whatever we can to keep them safe is something that we need to do. MnDOT has listed the main reasons that kids are involved in crashes is they run off from behind parked cars, they'll cross mid-block, kind of wherever. A lot of younger kids don't understand traffic control devices, so they just see it as a big road.
Yeah, we can't just assume that the kids are going to cross at the crosswalks, and traveling at lower speeds gives the drivers more reaction time. So we definitely would like to alert them of the school zones.
And a stat from MnDOT is that nearly 4% of pedestrian crashes result in a death, whereas with the regular traffic crashes, about 0.5% result in a death. So that's an 8 times increase in ped crashes. And so with schools having a lot of ped volumes, that's obviously important.
And another really important angle on this is the survivability of a crash. You'll see the chart on the left at 20 miles per hour, depending on age, but you'll see kind of 20-year-olds and younger have about a 3% chance of being killed by being hit with a car 20 miles an hour. You go all the way to the right, just up to 30 miles an hour, and that rate increases to 13%. So you can just see that it's an exponential curve here, and if we can get people to drive slower around schools, even if a kid jumps in front of them, it's probably not going to result in a fatality.
Yeah, looking at these curves, kind of at the 30 mile an hour point is where it really starts to ramp up. So if we can keep cars under 30, under 25 even, that'd be a great increase in safety. So when to include them? Kind of following MnDOT's guidelines, there's 3 different components on conducting a study of when to include a school speed zone. First is to identify a school route plan, and then you look through the different hazards, identify different hazards around school zones, and also education is a big important piece of this. Again, as we mentioned, kids don't always know what all these crosswalks or stop signs, exactly how that stuff works.
Yeah, and this is a pretty logical approach to kind of have a comprehensive plan around the school and how kids are getting there, and then on those routes, make them safe by removing obstacles such as cars parked in the crosswalk, things like that. And then, but lastly, is we need to teach the kids what the different traffic control devices mean and what safe behavior is. So this very much is important to work with your schools and your jurisdictions to do our side of it as engineers, but also to help them work on the education piece.
Right, we can design a perfect road, but it might mean nothing to a 7-year-old, so education is very important.
So the first component is the school route plan, and ideally we're going to minimize the number of streets any kid has to cross to get to the school, and then those crossings that we are minimizing, we're trying to look at them to remove shrubs on the corners, do things like that might block visibility. Maybe put in striped crosswalks to improve visibility, although the data is a little murky on crosswalks as a pure safety device.
Right, and this isn't just in front of the school. We have to recognize that kids are coming from all over the place. So this image here kind of is just a sample. Kids are coming from all over our neighborhood, so they're not just walking in front of the school. They could be walking on many different blocks. So you need to kind of expand your scope if you're looking at the overall safety of the traveling to school. Yeah,
and definitely work with the school district and the individual schools. Different districts have different busing policies. Some bus kids that are more than a half a mile away. Some stretch that out to a mile away. So that radius around the school will be dependent on the busing regulations, policies of the school district.
Yep, and the school route plan will be something that comes into play for the rest of the study, and is also something that should be shared with parents and students.
So the next, once you have a good safe route plan in place, then there's kind of 9 steps we're going to go through, but they're all kind of under the category of hazard identification and then removal or minimization, mitigation. But kind of the 9 criteria under hazard identification. The first one being roadway geometry.
This is not an example of a place where there'd be a good school crossing location. So that's a quick one right off the bat. With roadway geometry, we want to look at how wide are the roads. Is there a shoulder? Is there no shoulder? Is there no shoulders? I mean, the cars are 2 feet from the kids who are walking on the grass or on the sidewalk. If that's the case, you may need to look at narrower lanes, bump outs, things like that. Crossing narrow roads in a straight section is ideal for peds. If it's a wide road on a curve, these are hazards you want to identify.
And the next one is kind of traffic volumes, that if we can minimize crossings of busy collectors and arterials, that's all the better.
Right.
And at those crossing points, we would like traffic signals, maybe in-person crossing guards, but we really want to minimize that exposure to heavier traffic volumes as much as possible on the routes.
Ped volumes, obviously, this is kind of the whole reason we're looking at this, is for kids out on the roads. Higher concentrations of peds are generally safer. If a driver knows that this crosswalk always has a lot of kids, they're going to be looking for it. If the kids are spread out all over the school, they're crossing wherever, it's a lot more dangerous because drivers aren't always paying attention for every 10 feet to see a kid crossing the road. So if we can kind of push all the kids to cross at a couple locations, that'll increase the safety.
Yeah, and next one is on-street parking. We've all heard terrible stories of kids running out between cars. So the more we can make sure we have clear sight lines between the drivers and the kids, the better. So along those safe routes, whether parking is banned or allowed or just banned at the corner crossings, obviously a lot of engineering judgment goes into this, but if you have 2 routes and one is heavily parked in a commercial district and the parallel route has no parked vehicles, that may be a reason to slant towards that less parked route.
And that also kind of ties into loading drop-off zones. If you can get parents to drop off their kids off, not on street, if there's an off-street loading zone, that's better, so there just less conflicts with the kids getting out of the cars.
And then traffic control devices, of course, make sure they're all up to MUTCD standards. We like ped countdown timers at signals.
Yep.
It gives more clarity, so the kids get better communication of what's happening at the signal, so they know if they need to start speeding up to get across. And we all know of plenty of adults who don't quite understand the walking man versus flashing don't walk versus solid don't walk.
I remember as a kid I did not understand the flashing red hand, so I think the countdown timers are very helpful in that regard.
So kind of the next one as well is just sidewalks. And in my old neighborhood in St. Louis Park, there were gaps in the sidewalks near the school we sent the kids to, and we ended up rerouting them a block out of the way to make sure that they could stay on a sidewalk the whole way. But make sure they're maintained, no tripping hazards, those kinds of things. Here in Minnesota, hopefully the residents are doing a good job of shoveling, but sometimes the schools will get out with their own big equipment and take care of the snow on sidewalks on their routes. But definitely the more we can segregate the kids from traffic, the better. So a good sidewalk system obviously helps with that.
Yep. Fences are also another thing to keep in mind. Fences very much influence walking paths. So if there's a fence, you can't walk through it, so you are kind of forced to walk one way or another. Fences can also reduce kids running in the road. If there's a fence along the playground and a ball gets kicked over or hit over, a ball might go in the road, but there's not going to be a kid falling behind it. So kind of keeping the kids where they should be, fence is going to be very useful in that around schools.
Yeah, and that ends up going back to concentrating the pedestrians, I think number
Right.
3 on our list of trying to keep them together as a group around the school helps.
Crash history is something you need to look for when you're analyzing where to put a school speed zone. You do need to look at the crashes and determine if they are school related or not, if they happen during weekdays, during school times, during the school year. And that's something that needs to be identified, and those mitigation measures should be taken to alleviate those crashes in any case. If there's some reason hazards cannot be removed to eliminate this crash threat, then the school route should be changed so the kids are not walking anywhere near these dangerous zones.
Yeah, obviously we don't want to put the safe route through one of our more dangerous intersections
Right.
in the city. So that should be part of the route planning.
And then speed zone. So if all else looks good or there's nothing else really to do, and speed zone may be what you need to look for, it's recommended that you check the existing speeds with tube counters, or you can take the more intimidating approach here, showing the photo of the guys with the radar.
And guns.
Yeah. But yeah, check the speeds, see if people are complying with the existing posted speeds. If they're not, that may be an indication that you'd want to lower the speeds and definitely enforce those.
Yeah, we all know enforcement is key to getting any kind of speed zone obeyed. We've all seen the great scatter plots of traffic normally travels at a bell-shaped curve, but then you put enforcement there and all of a sudden it looks like a hockey stick with everyone clustered around the speed limit.
Right. And as far as choosing what speed to make a school speed zone, that MnDOT's guidance recommends lowering the existing speed 10 to 15 miles an hour. If you don't want to lower it more than 20 miles an hour, because that's a big jump and that could cause some issues.
Kind
with
of rear end crashes and things like that.
Yeah, some people going slow, some going fast, and that's a safety issue right there. And if you lowered 5 miles an hour, that's almost, it's like nothing.
Yeah, so in Minnesota, our statutory residential speed limits are 30 miles an hour, which means we like to go into that 15 to 20 or 20 miles an hour in the school zone. Right. And going back to those safety curves of if a pedestrian is hit, the survivability, we really like that 15 to 20 speed limit.
Yep.
And then the third component, so first component being actually having the comprehensive safe route plan, second component analyzing those safe routes and reducing or eliminating the hazards along the routes. Then the third kind of leg to the stool is education and getting out there and talking to the kids, and whether it's police liaisons or an actual public works program of sending staff out to talk at the different schools or providing materials to each of the schools so their teachers can run through some type of presentation. There's lots of different ways you can do that. But we really do want to teach kids what traffic laws mean, what the different devices mean, the importance of staying on the routes and crossing at the intersections, staying visible, all those good habits we want to develop. Teachers need to be involved.
Yeah. You don't want to freak the kids out, but you do need to kind of stress how dangerous roads can be. There are some other benefits to reducing speeds in a school zone. One is that slower speeds, the buses can mix better with other traffic. So this is a typical example of a school near us.
Maybe not.
So if there's a lot of parents coming in, dropping kids off, a lot of entering, exiting traffic, buses, and if it's on on just a regular busy road, there's a lot going on. So lower speeds in general can help make the area more navigatable.
Yes.
Also, one benefit of these school speed zone limits is that they're part-time speed limits. When it's summertime or evening or even midday, you can travel down that road at the normal speed. But just at these key times when the kids are outside, that's when it takes place. It's kind of the flashing yellow arrow of speed limits.
Yeah, it's there when we need it.
Yep. So speed limit signs by themselves might be a placebo. You put a speed limit sign that says 20 miles an hour and you assume everyone's going to go 20 miles an hour. But some people drive based on how wide the road is, how comfortable they feel driving, not necessarily watching the speed, while other people are very much stick to the speed limit because they don't want to get a ticket or something. So that could create a variation in travel speeds if you all of a sudden lower the speed by 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, our strong preference, if we are finding, so our process is we put tubes out along the road in question, and if the speeds are coming in that they're a little bit, the 85th percentile speed is more than the posted speed limit, or certainly kind of more than we're comfortable with, then we'll advise that we should put it in the school speed zone. But we strongly prefer to put in the signs with flashers and put timers on those, and ideally line those up for kind of the 45 minutes around, half an hour before, 15 minutes after school bell starts, and then kind of straddle the end of the school day as well. And also ideally program them so they're Monday through Friday, and and they're turned off when the summer break is happening.
Yes.
We probably will miss a few of the one-day holidays, but at least try to make it so it's an active warning sign instead of just a passive sign. And a couple of other things we like to do are some of the more physical safety improvements, looking at should we put in a raised ped crossing or some type of speed hump, some type of traffic calming along the routes, especially the busier routes, to help improve the safety and physically lower the speeds. Because again, just static signs are often just a placebo.
So yeah, as you showed, speed humps, raised ped crossings are good. Bump outs or chokers can help decrease the crossing width. Increased sight distance for drivers. Obviously, it's very clear when someone wants to cross the road here. They might not be great for bikes if there's a bike lane, but those are options you're going to have to weigh. And kind of something very important that can be utilized is school crossing guards, especially on higher speed roads. To have an adult there who understands how traffic works out there waving kids across these busier roads can be a huge benefit.
Yes, and hopefully they're wearing the high visibility vests, and they either have some type of paddle sign or the AAA in the United States, American Automobile Association, I believe, they will provide orange flags to the schools with stop on them to help those crossing guards. But we're big fans of crossing guards close to the school. And think that that's the first thing that should be done versus just putting out signs, putting in a speed limit zone, school zone.
Yeah, and a crossing guard can also kind of tell you the actual situation out there. They can report back and say it's a dangerous road, it's really busy, whereas a sign cannot talk so well.
Yeah. So thank you. That's kind of run through our presentation. I see Mark asked the question, are we going to discuss where speed zones are applicable or discuss criteria when not to implement? Our first step is definitely, like I said, to get out there and put down tubes so we can get speed data over the course of a week. Our default position is we typically don't like to put in school speed zones unless there really is a speeding problem. But if those 85th percentile speeds are exceeding the speed limit, then we're going to want to reduce the speed limit down and put in an active system to warn of it. And then along with that comes the enforcement the city needs to commit to. But our first point being we prefer not to put them in and make sure there are crossing guards, and then get to some of the physical bump outs to minimize the crossings and maybe speed humps, but the more physical traffic calming is our preference.
Yeah, something that will actually lower the speed limit for the people who don't care about speed limits.
Yeah. Let's see, looking through any other questions out there. Okay, I don't see any. So looking ahead, we do have a couple questions. I've been requested to install a mid-block crosswalk with a school zone, low school pedestrian walkers, and virtually no. Okay, looks like we got cut off. I am virtually no off-hour peds. I am very leery of putting in that kind of situation and would prefer to see them just go down to the adjacent corner. And like I said, my kids had to walk a couple of blocks out of their way to adhere to the safe route plan and to stay on the sidewalk. So I would rather see them go down an extra 150 feet to an intersection. Let's see.
A few more up there.
Yeah. We've been asked from time to time about installing speed zones in advance of an already signalized intersection. That's a gray area that I've also seen them. I think it would depend on the level of traffic. Are we talking an arterial, or are we talking kind of a lower volume collector?
Yeah, we had a situation that we looked at just a couple months ago where there was an all-way stop on a road, and we found that the speeds were well over the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit out there. So we actually ended up recommending a speed zone, even though there was an all-way stop right in the middle of the stretch.
Yeah, 2 blocks away, the 85th percentile speed was about 33, 34 miles an hour, which really surprised us. So I don't know that the signal automatically means you don't want to put in the school speed zone. Let's get the data and go through the process.
Right.
Let's see. Okay, 1 beacon versus 2 beacons, going off of FDOT saying they only need 1 beacon. I don't know of any safety studies that talk about 1 versus 2 beacons. I know we do have the rapid flashing, kind of the wig-wag, different types of signs, and those, just because they're really obnoxious and bright, catch people's attention more. So I think that's a debatable one. I'm not sure that 1 or 2 beacons matter, 1 versus 2, but the rapid flashing, that is a step up from either the 1 or 2 beacons.
Yeah.
What about in a high school zone with very little foot traffic? It gets very debatable. We don't have warrants that are based on the number of pedestrian crossings. So it's not as much a rate of exposure as it is, even if there are just a couple of kids out there walking, that society says we should go towards the safety level of putting this in.
Right. And I think with a high school as well, the level of understanding, like one of the reasons we request these lower speeds in elementary schools is because kids don't get it. High schoolers, a lot of them are driving, so they know how to navigate the traffic better. So I think when you get into a high school or a college, the situation does change based on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back over my career, and that's a very interesting point that I think all of these reviews I've done have been for the elementary and the junior high schools. I don't think I've done one for a high school. Let's see. Wisconsin removed flashing or timeframes for school speed limits. Any idea why? Only when children present is allowed per the Wisconsin MUTCD.
That kind of goes against what we had talked about, our preference.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they would do that. If you could program it for when those peak periods are and have the flashers be on, that seems to be intuitive. So,
yeah, my only thought is that people aren't programming them, so they're
if they're always on, or if they're flashing at the wrong times, obviously that's a big problem. Mm-hmm. But if they're properly maintained, I don't know why they would do that. Okay. Looking at Mark's request, Yeah, our request is have a median divided major 4-lane arterial, 20,000 ADT, with already prepared to stop when flashing beacons. There, I think it's much more important to get the kids crossing at signalized crosswalks, and seems like the more appropriate tool may be to get a signal, which we do have the school warrant in there, at one of the adjacent intersections, and then push all the kids at the safe route through that signalized intersection. I don't know that a lowered speed limit would be appropriate on that kind of arterial.
Yeah, so whenever possible, adjust the school route plan to use existing infrastructure.
Okay. Well, we've hit 1 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. I just want to flip over and let everyone know that next month we will be talking about autonomous vehicles. And as Nancy said, we did get great reception on that one, so we thought we'd bring it back. And so if you watched it, no reason to tune in again. But if you weren't able to make it the first time, we hope you'll be able to make that. Also, last thing, on Mike on Traffic, we do have a 7-post series that talks about school safety, kind of goes through a lot of these issues in more detail. So you might want to check that out. The last question from Bill is there spec on distance of your flasher from the road? And there is in at least our Minnesota sign design manuals, there's different criteria based on curb and gutter versus just a ditch section, also speed limits, and is there sidewalk? So yes, there are definitely specs on it, but it needs to be designed for the situation. The closest possible to the edge of the road in the safe zone is the general idea. So thanks, everyone, and look forward to seeing you next month.
All right, thank you.